Hello guys, and welcome to my vlog on speed and agility. In this vlog I'm going to be looking at an athlete performing a maximal sprint where I will focus on their top end speed and an agility exercise through the use of a T-drill. Now I've chosen both of these drills as they represent the highest demands that the athlete will experience in a game situation, whether that be the maximal speed that they experience or are able to generate, and an aggressive redirection of 90 degrees. Throughout this video, I'll analyze the exercise the athlete is performing and provide my reflections and feedback as to why I've highlighted them to have either a skill or a capacity issue. I'll also provide videos on tests that are used to help me get to a deeper understanding as to what the issue may be. I will then finally provide exercises that will help negate the seen problem. As mentioned, we will be identifying whether an athlete falls into two categories, one being skill and the other being a capacity issue. When we consider the performance outcome and what makes effective movement patterns or motor control strategies, the underpinning key areas are seen on this slide. These are, as identified, a skill or a capacity quality. A skill issue here refers to having good abilities in the capacity or secondary transfer of training aspect, such as strength, balance, range of motion, etc. But being unfamiliar with that particular exercise, the demands of that exercise, and potentially the correct or optimal technique that is required to best execute that exercise. Skill qualities or aspects can be enhanced relatively easily and straightforward by potential verbal cues, visual demonstrations, and just practice repetitions for the athlete to learn the motor control or coordination that is required of that task. However, capacity issues are things that underpin our ability to execute a skill, and they are things such as strength, balance, coordination. And as in strength and conditioning coaches, these are also things that are relatively straightforward to enhance in order to be effective in movement patterns. The following athlete has been identified as having a skill issue whilst performing a max sprint. The athlete contacts the ground underneath his centre of mass, which then allows him to have an effective foot recovery for the next swing phase and knee drive. However, the athlete, while performing this exercise, doesn't get appropriate dorsiflexion at his ankle. This failure to flex at the ankle limits his ability for pre-tension of the lower limb in order to generate high vertical ground reaction forces at speed. This could therefore identify that he spends longer time on the ground in order to generate more horizontal forces. As we can see, this athlete has had an injury history with multiple high ankle sprains, which could also have a limiting factor here. I used a single leg squat to help identify whether there was any strength or balance issues the athlete had. Now, while it could be easy to say that this athlete lacks the strength to do the exercise, if you actually notice, all of this originates from his ankle stability. The overhead A march and A skip helped me eliminate that this athlete has a capacity issue. That's because he was able to hit the appropriate ranges of motion minus his left foot, which was fixed after simple cues. As well as audio and visual feedback, the athlete was given the following exercises to work on ankle stiffness and vertical ground reaction forces. They are pogos and hurdle hops. The following athlete has been identified as having a capacity issue in maximal velocity. From initial observations, it's quite clear that the athlete has capacity issues that affect his running ability. As we can see, there is a lot of flexion at the trunk and movement in his shoulders, which indicates poor core control. The athlete contacts the ground in front of his body, experiencing more braking forces. He then has a poor foot recovery, which then translates into a poor knee drive. This is all down to potential poor ankle stiffness, which means that he wants to have longer on the ground to generate more horizontal force. Due to the athlete's lack of core control, he throws his arms across his body, meaning that there's a lot of rotation throughout the movement. Could then translate down into his hips, where we see his knees come away from the midline of his body and his knees angle out in order to generate more horizontal force, as shown in his ankle also. This athlete has a history of multiple clavicle fractures, which could be a contributing factor for his poor core control. As before, we use the single leg squat test in order to assess his lower body strength and balance capacities. This athlete has adequate lower body strength and balance, therefore we can eliminate that as a contributing factor to his running technique. As we can see here in his A strips, he has a lot of movement in his upper body due to his poor core control. Therefore, prescription of the dead bug and anti-rotation holds and Pallof press would be prescribed in order to aid this. I implemented a B skip in order to aid his foot strike and recovery. The next athlete has been identified as having a skill issue when it comes to his agility drills. The athlete, as we can see, has adequate levels of strength as he's able to plant and generate force in the opposite direction quite well, while staying very upright. He does, however, overreach and takes quite big steps, therefore identifying that he's just unfamiliar with some of the movements and techniques required. While the athlete plants his leg, he doesn't actually re-accelerate with that outside leg, he uses his inside leg, therefore identifying his novice approach. As we identified, the athlete has high levels of strength and has no notable injury history. In order to help this athlete learn how to load his outside leg and create ankle stiffness, I've prescribed multiple little hurdle drills in order to aid this. This next athlete has been identified as having a capacity issue with regards to his agility. As this athlete approaches the cones, we see that he doesn't actually chop his feet. That is typical of being able to slow and then re-accelerate to a stimulus. What we see here is when he's given a direction to accelerate towards he actually jumps in towards the cones in order to load his legs. Due to the athlete taking these big steps, when he reacts to a stimulus, he actually doesn't plant underneath his body to re-accelerate in that direction. He throws his leg, which means that he has a lot more force to overcome. As the athlete approaches this cone, he's actually able to control his body relatively well. However, on the other side, the base of support is quite wide, and while this offers good stability, it actually hinders the ability to re-accelerate in the opposite direction. Again, we see this